Hello, friends, and welcome to today's reading of Ken Schoolin's The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, a Free Market Odyssey. This is Chapter 20, Bored of Digestion. Make me the master of education, and I will undertake to change the world. Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. Before he walked away, Jonathan asked for directions to the town hall. Rose looked worried and placed a hand on his arm. Please, Jonathan, don't tell anyone about the meals that we served you. We don't have a permit. What? Said Jonathan. You need a permit to serve meals? In town, yes, she replied, and it can be quite a problem for us if the authorities get word of our serving meals without a permit. What's the permit for? It's to guarantee a certain standard of food for all. Years ago, townsfolk used to buy their food from street vendors, corner cafes, fancy restaurants, or they would get food at stores and cook it in their own homes. Then the Council of Lords argued that it was unfair that some people should eat better than others, and that people had to be protected from their own poor judgment. So they created political cafeterias where everyone in town could eat standard food for free. Not exactly free, of course, said Grandpa, pulling out his wallet and waving it slowly in front of Jonathan's nose. The cost of each meal is much more than ever before, but nobody pays at the door. Uncle Samta paid with our taxes. Since meals at the political cafeterias, or politicafes, were already paid for, a lot of people stopped going to private providers where they had to pay extra. With fewer customers, the private restaurants raised prices to cover expenses. Some survived with a handful of wealthy clients or with people on special religious diets, but most went out of business. Why would anyone pay for meals if they could go to politicafes for free? Wondered Jonathan aloud. Rose laughed. Because the politicafes became awful. The cooks, the food, the atmosphere, you name it. Bad cooks never get fired from politicafes. Their guild is too strong. And really, good cooks are seldom rewarded because the bad cooks get jealous. The buildings are falling apart. Filth and graffiti are everywhere. Morale is low, the food is bland, and the Bored of Digestion decides the menu. That's the worst part, exclaimed Grandpa. They try to please their friends, and nobody's ever satisfied. You should have seen the fight over noodles and rice. Noodles and rice, day in and day out for decades. Then the Spud Lobby organized their campaign for bread and potatoes. Remember that? He said, nodding to his wife. When potato lovers finally got their people on the board, that was the last we ever heard of noodles and rice. Davy made a choking sound. Peeking out from behind his grandmother's skirt, Davy's nose crinkled in disgust. I hate potatoes, Grandma. Better eat them, dear, or the nutrient officers will get you. Nutrient officers? Asked Jonathan. Shh, said Grandpa, placing a finger to his lips. He looked over his shoulder and then down the street to see if anyone was watching. Those who avoid politically approved foods usually fall into the hands of the nutrient officers. Kids call them newts for short. Newts closely monitor attendance at meals, and they hunt for anyone who fails to show up. Nutrient delinquents are taken to special detention cafeterias for forced feeding. Davy shuddered. But couldn't we just eat at home? Grandma's cooking is the best. It's not allowed, dear, said Rose, patting Davy on the head. A few people have special permits, but Grandpa Milton and I don't have the specified training, and we can't afford the elaborate kitchen facilities that would meet their requirements. You see, Davy, the Lords believe that they care more for your needs than Grandpa and I do. Besides, added Grandpa, we both have to work in order to pay their taxes for all this. Grandpa Milton paced around the porch, half talking to himself and grumbling. They tell us that we now have a lower digester to cook ratio than at any time in history, though half of the population is functionally malnourished. The original plan to give better nutrition to the poor has ended with poor nutrition for all. Some misfits have refused to eat and seem on the verge of starvation, even though their food is free. Worse yet, vandals and gangsters roam the political cafeterias, and no one feels safe there anymore. Please stop, said Rose to her husband, seeing the shocked look on Jonathan's face. He'll be scared to death when he goes to a politicafe. Turning to Jonathan, she warned, just have your identity card ready when you show up at the door. You'll be all right. Thank you for your concern, Grandma Rose, said Jonathan. wondering what an identity card looked like and how he'd ever get food without one. Would you mind if I pocketed a couple of extra slices of bread before leaving? Why, sure, dear. Have as many as you like. She went back into the kitchen and returned with several slices neatly wrapped in a napkin. She looked stealthily in both directions to see if any of her neighbors were watching, then proudly handed them to Jonathan, saying, "Take good care of these. My son-in-law used to grow extra wheat for our flour, but the food police just—" "I know," said Jonathan. "I'll be careful not to show this bread to anyone. Thank you for everything." With a goodbye wave, Jonathan stepped out on the street, feeling warmed by the thought that, if necessary, he had a home in this forbidding island. And that is the end of chapter 20, Bored of Digestion. And once again, we find relevance. For those of you that don't know, and hopefully that some of you that watch already do know and are aware of this, but one of the areas of political activism that I've been involved with for about 4 years now is an event called Feed the Need that happens near downtown Dallas, usually the first weekend in December. You see, in the city of Dallas, it is against the law to feed homeless people. Now, why that's the law, I've heard it explained without a permit. It's illegal without a permit. If you have a special permit, you can feed homeless people. But without a special permit, that's against the law, and you could get a citation. So a group of patriots, a group called Don't Comply, started about 7 years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, I don't recall which. They started doing an event of civil disobedience where they go to Dallas and set up a big area where they hand out food. They serve hot meals to the homeless. They gather warm items, blankets, gloves, clothing, boots, shoes, hats, sleeping bags, tents, and they pass those things out. And the homeless community there in the area has come to see it kind of like a Christmas party. And so there's hundreds of people that show up. I've been to the last 4. And the other thing that happens is the people that are there feeding the homeless show up heavily armed to conduct this bit of civil disobedience and also to make sure that they are not stopped from doing what they're doing. Now, I think the being armed is an effective way to create a sense of equality between the authorities and the people that are engaged in the civil disobedience. But I think the most effective weapon against being stopped by authorities is the camera. And there are always plenty of those out there as well during that event. But this chapter reminded me of that, and that it's not this is not a fantasy tale that Ken Schooland has written. It's really kind of a mirror to our society that's just being cleverly told. And this is my first reading of the book. I've just started reading it. Back with chapter 1. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed chapter 20, and I will be back tomorrow with chapter 21. Chapter 21, give me your past or your future. Have a great day, and I will put some links to some videos and information about that Feed the Need event in the comments. Have a great day.